Have you ever wondered why some people keep moving forward no matter how many times they fail while others give up after their first setback? It's not because they're smarter. It's not because they're more talented. And it's certainly not because they have fewer obstacles in their lives. The difference is their mindset. You see, success is not about what you do when everything is going your way. Success is about who you become when life tests your commitment, your patience, and your belief in yourself. The most successful people in the world aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who have a reason strong enough to keep going when failure shows up. When you have a clear purpose, challenges become lessons. Rejection becomes feedback. And obstacles become opportunities to grow stronger. Today, we're going to explore how to develop a success mindset that never gives up. A mindset that stays focused when others quit, stays confident when others doubt, and keeps moving forward when the path gets difficult. Because the moment you learn to master your mindset, you begin to unlock a version of yourself that is capable of achieving far more than you ever imagined. Let's begin. Every great achievement begins with a reason. Before the success, before the recognition, before the results that everyone sees, there is always a deeper purpose driving a person forward. That purpose is what gives meaning to effort, strength during difficult times, and direction when uncertainty appears. Many people focus on goals, but very few take the time to understand why those goals matter to them. The truth is that goals can change, circumstances can shift, and plans can fail, but a powerful reason can keep a person moving forward no matter what happens. Think about the people who accomplish extraordinary things. They are not always the most talented. They are not always the smartest. What separates them from everyone else is often their ability to stay committed when things become difficult. That commitment comes from knowing exactly why they started in the first place. When a person understands their purpose, they stop relying on motivation alone. Motivation is temporary. It comes and goes depending on emotions, circumstances, and energy levels. Purpose is different. Purpose remains steady even when motivation disappears. Many people quit because they focus only on what they want. They want success, money, recognition, freedom, or achievement. These things can be powerful goals, but they are not always strong enough to sustain effort through challenges. When obstacles arise, the excitement of the goal begins to fade. The struggle feels bigger than the reward. Doubts begin to appear. The mind starts creating reasons to stop. This is where a strong why becomes essential. A clear purpose reminds you why the struggle matters. It reminds you why the sacrifice is worth making. It gives you a reason to continue even when the outcome is uncertain. Imagine two people starting the same journey. Both want to succeed. Both have similar skills and opportunities. The first person is driven by a desire to impress others. The second person is driven by a desire to create a better future for themselves and the people they care about. When challenges appear, the first person's motivation begins to weaken because external validation is often unreliable. The second person continues moving forward because their purpose is connected to something deeper than approval. One reason is temporary. The other is meaningful. Your why acts like an internal compass. Life will not always be predictable. There will be moments when the path ahead becomes unclear. There will be failures, setbacks, disappointments, and unexpected obstacles. During those moments, your purpose helps you stay focused on what truly matters. Instead of becoming distracted by every challenge, you remain connected to the bigger picture. You remember the reason behind your actions and continue moving in the direction that aligns with your values and goals. A strong why also creates resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover from difficulties and keep moving forward. People often think resilience is something you are born with, but it is usually built through purpose. When you care deeply about something, you develop the strength to endure more than you thought possible. You become willing to learn, adapt, and try again because giving up would mean abandoning something important to you. Many successful people have faced repeated failures before achieving their goals. What allowed them to continue was not luck or perfect circumstances. It was their commitment to a purpose greater than the obstacles standing in front of them. They understood that every setback was part of the journey, not the end of it. Their purpose gave them the patience to keep learning and the courage to keep trying. Finding your why requires honesty. It requires looking beyond surface-level goals and asking deeper questions. Why do you want success? Why does this goal matter to you? What impact do you want to create? How would achieving this goal change your life or the lives of others? The answers to these questions reveal motivations that are far more powerful than simple ambition. They uncover the values, dreams, and beliefs that drive meaningful action. When your actions are connected to purpose, even small tasks become significant. Hard work no longer feels like punishment. Challenges no longer feel meaningless. Every step becomes part of a larger mission. This mindset changes the way you approach obstacles. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What can this teach me?" Instead of seeing barriers, you start seeing opportunities to grow stronger and wiser. Purpose also provides clarity. In a world full of distractions, it is easy to lose focus. There are endless opinions, opportunities, and expectations competing for your attention. Without a clear reason guiding you, it becomes difficult to know which direction to take. A strong why helps you make better decisions because it gives you a standard for evaluating your choices. If something aligns with your purpose, it deserves your energy. If it does not, it becomes easier to let it go. The most powerful reasons are often connected to contribution, growth, and meaning. They go beyond personal gain and connect to something larger than immediate rewards. When your purpose serves a deeper mission, your determination becomes stronger. You become less dependent on external circumstances because your drive comes from within. You are no longer chasing success simply because it looks attractive. You are pursuing it because it represents something important to your identity and values. People with a strong why do not avoid fear. They feel fear just like everyone else. The difference is that their purpose is greater than their fear. They understand that growth requires discomfort and that meaningful achievements often demand sacrifice. Their reason gives them the courage to take action despite uncertainty. They move forward not because the path is easy, but because the destination matters. A success mindset begins with understanding that lasting determination is built on purpose. Skills can be learned. Strategies can be improved. Opportunities can be created. But without a meaningful reason driving your actions, persistence becomes difficult. The stronger your why, the stronger your ability to endure challenges, remain focused, and continue moving toward your goals regardless of the obstacles that stand in your way. Failure is one of the most misunderstood experiences in human growth. Most people are taught to avoid it, hide it, or feel ashamed of it. From a very early age, failure is often labeled as something negative, something that reflects a lack of ability or intelligence. But in reality, failure is one of the most powerful forms of feedback we can ever receive. It is not the opposite of success. It is part of the process that leads to success. The problem is not that people fail. The problem is that they interpret failure incorrectly. When you look at any meaningful achievement, you will find a trail of mistakes behind it. Every successful person has failed more times than most people have even tried. What separates them is not that they avoided failure, but that they learned how to use it. Instead of seeing failure as a final outcome, they see it as information. Information about what does not work, information about what needs to be improved, and information about how to adjust the next attempt. This shift in perspective changes everything about how progress is made. Most people stop too early because failure feels personal. When something goes wrong, they assume it means something about their identity rather than their approach. They say things like, "I am not good enough," or "I cannot do this," instead of asking a more useful question like, "What did this teach me?" Or, "What can I adjust next time?" The moment failure becomes personal, it becomes painful. And when something is painful, the natural human response is to avoid it. That avoidance is what stops growth. A success mindset understands that failure is not a reflection of who you are, but a reflection of what you tried. There is a big difference between identity and action. You are not defined by a single attempt, a single mistake, or a single outcome. You are defined by your ability to continue after those moments. When you start to detach your identity from your results, you become more willing to take risks, more willing to experiment, and more willing to step into situations where the outcome is uncertain. Every failure carries a message, but only if you are willing to listen to it. Sometimes the message is that your strategy needs adjustment. Sometimes it is that your timing was off. Sometimes it is that you need more practice, more knowledge, or more patience. And sometimes the message is simply that you are one step closer to understanding what does not work, which automatically brings you closer to what does work. But none of this becomes useful unless you pause long enough to reflect instead of react emotionally. People often underestimate how much emotional control is required to turn failure into feedback. The immediate reaction to failure is frustration, disappointment, or self-doubt. These emotions are natural, but they are also temporary. The danger comes when decisions are made during emotional reactions. When someone fails and immediately decides to quit, they are not responding to reality, they are responding to discomfort. A strong mindset learns to separate the emotional experience from the analytical response. First feel it, then study it, then learn from it. There is also a pattern among those who develop resilience through failure. They begin to see small failures as necessary repetitions rather than major setbacks. Just like physical training requires repeated stress on muscles to grow stronger, mental and emotional strength also requires repeated exposure to difficulty. If everything always works on the first try, there is no development of depth, no building of character, and no strengthening of persistence. The discomfort is part of the construction process. What most people miss is that failure often contains hidden progress. Even when the result is not what you wanted, you are still gaining experience, awareness, and understanding. You are building familiarity with the process. You are learning how things behave under real conditions rather than theoretical ones. This kind of learning cannot happen through reading or observation alone. It happens through action, and action always involves uncertainty. The difference between those who succeed and those who give up is not the absence of failure, but the interpretation of it. One person sees failure as a stop sign, the other sees it as a guidepost. One person sees it as proof that they should quit, the other sees it as proof that they are actively in the process of learning something valuable. This interpretation determines whether momentum continues or stops completely. Even when failure feels overwhelming, there is always something inside it that can be used for improvement. Sometimes it is a small adjustment in behavior, sometimes it is a shift in approach, and sometimes it is a complete rethinking of strategy. But none of that becomes visible unless there is willingness to stay engaged with the process instead of walking away from it. Growth is often found in the space between what you expected and what actually happened. In that gap where discomfort exists and understanding has not yet fully formed, where you are still trying to make sense of what just unfolded and how it might influence the next attempt. When you start to notice patterns that were not visible before, and when you start to see self-belief is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior, yet it is also one of the most fragile. It is shaped over time by experiences, environment, feedback, and the way a person interprets their own journey. When self-belief is strong, a person moves with confidence, takes action without excessive hesitation, and is willing to face uncertainty with courage. When it is weak, even simple tasks can feel overwhelming, and opportunities are often avoided not because they are impossible, but because they feel unreachable in the mind of the individual. Many people assume that self-belief comes after success, but in reality, it often comes before it. You do not become confident only after achieving something significant. Instead, confidence is what allows you to attempt something significant in the first place. This creates a cycle. Belief leads to action. Action leads to results, and results reinforce belief. But the cycle must begin somewhere. And that starting point is always a decision to trust yourself even before external proof exists. The challenge is that most people rely too heavily on external validation. They wait for others to approve their ideas, confirm their abilities, or recognize their potential before they start believing in themselves. This creates dependence on outside opinions, which are always inconsistent and often unpredictable. When your self-worth depends on external feedback, your confidence rises and falls depending on circumstances you cannot control. A success mindset requires breaking free from this dependency and building internal validation instead. Internal belief means trusting your ability to figure things out even when you do not have all the answers. It is not about believing you are already perfect or fully skilled. It is about believing that you are capable of learning, adapting, and improving through experience. This is a much stronger form of confidence because it is not based on current ability, but on potential growth. It allows you to enter situations where you are not fully prepared, knowing that preparation itself can be developed through action. One of the biggest threats to self-belief is comparison. When people constantly compare themselves to others, especially those who appear more successful or more talented, they begin to underestimate their own progress. They forget that every person is on a different timeline, with different challenges, resources, and experiences. Comparison shifts focus away from personal growth and redirects it toward external measurement. Instead of asking, Am I improving? People start asking, am I better than them? This creates insecurity rather than growth. A strong mindset understands that confidence is built through evidence. Every time you take action and survive a challenge, you create evidence that you are capable. Every time you learn something new and apply it, you reinforce your ability to grow. Even small wins matter because they accumulate over time. The mind responds to repeated proof. If you consistently show yourself that you can handle difficulty, your belief in yourself becomes stronger naturally. However, the opposite is also true. If you repeatedly avoid challenges, your self-belief weakens. Avoidance teaches the mind that situations are too difficult, too risky, or too overwhelming. Over time, this creates a pattern of hesitation. That is why action is essential. Even imperfect action is powerful because it breaks the cycle of doubt. You do not need perfect conditions to build confidence. You need consistent exposure to situations that challenge your current level. There is also an important distinction between confidence and arrogance. True self-belief is not about thinking you are better than others. It is about understanding your own capacity to grow. Arrogance ignores learning, while self-belief embraces it. Arrogance assumes certainty, while self-belief accepts uncertainty but moves forward anyway. A strong mindset does not require certainty before acting. It requires willingness to act despite uncertainty. The voice inside your mind plays a major role in shaping self-belief. Internal dialogue can either strengthen or weaken your confidence. When you repeatedly tell yourself that you are not good enough, not ready, or not capable, you begin to accept those thoughts as truth. But when you challenge those thoughts and replace them with more constructive ones, you start to change your perception of yourself. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means choosing interpretations that support growth rather than limitation. Every person has moments of doubt. Even the most successful individuals experience uncertainty. The difference is that they do not allow doubt to become a decision maker. They acknowledge it. But they do not obey it. They continue taking action even when confidence is not fully present. Over time, this creates resilience, and resilience strengthens belief. The more you act in spite of doubt, the weaker doubt becomes. Self-belief also grows when you start keeping promises to yourself. Every time you decide to do something and follow through, you build trust within yourself. That trust becomes the foundation of confidence. When you break promises to yourself repeatedly, even in small ways, your mind begins to doubt your reliability. This is why discipline and self-belief are closely connected. Discipline is the behavior that proves belief, and belief is the mindset that fuels discipline. There is a point in every growth journey where external validation becomes less important than internal certainty. At that point, a person stops waiting for permission and starts creating momentum through action. They stop questioning whether they are capable and start proving it through experience. They stop seeing themselves through the lens of past limitations and begin seeing themselves through the possibilities of future development, where each attempt becomes another opportunity to reinforce the idea that progress is always available, even when results are not immediate, and where persistence itself becomes evidence of strength. Daily discipline is the foundation that turns intention into reality. Many people have ideas, dreams, and goals, but very few have the structure in their daily lives to actually bring those ideas into existence. Discipline is not something that appears suddenly when motivation is high. It is something that is built through repetition, especially on the days when motivation is completely absent. It is easy to take action when you feel inspired, when everything seems exciting, and when energy is high. The real test begins when none of those feelings are present, yet you still choose to show up and do what needs to be done. A success mindset understands that consistency is more powerful than intensity. Intensity creates short bursts of effort, but consistency creates long-term transformation. You do not become successful because of what you do occasionally. You become successful because of what you do repeatedly. Every small action, when done consistently, compounds over time. It may not feel significant in the moment, but repetition slowly reshapes identity, behavior, and results. The difference between people who succeed and people who struggle is often not talent or opportunity, but the ability to repeat the right actions daily without losing direction. Discipline begins with structure. Without structure, the mind operates based on feelings, and feelings are unpredictable. On some days, you feel motivated and productive. On other days, you feel tired, distracted, or uncertain. If your actions depend on feelings, your progress will always be inconsistent. Structure removes that dependency. It creates a system where action is not optional, it is scheduled. When something becomes part of your routine, it stops requiring emotional negotiation. You simply do it because it is part of who you are becoming. There is also a misunderstanding that discipline is about restriction or limitation. In reality, discipline is about freedom. Without discipline, your life is controlled by distractions, impulses, and external influences. You react to whatever is happening around you. But when you develop discipline, you gain control over your time, your focus, and your direction. You stop being pulled in every direction and start moving intentionally toward what matters most. Discipline gives you the ability to say no to short-term distractions so you can say yes to long-term goals. One of the most important aspects of daily discipline is starting small. Many people fail because they try to make drastic changes too quickly. They create unrealistic expectations, and when they cannot meet them, they lose motivation and quit. Discipline is not built through extreme effort. It is built through manageable consistency. Small actions repeated daily are far more powerful than large actions done occasionally. The mind adapts better to gradual progress because it does not trigger resistance. Over time, small actions become habits and habits become identity. Identity plays a crucial role in discipline. When you start to see yourself as someone who acts consistently, your behavior begins to align with that identity. Instead of thinking, I need to work out, you start thinking, I am someone who takes care of my health. Instead of thinking, I should study, you start thinking, I am someone who learns and improves every day. This shift in identity reduces internal resistance because you are no longer forcing behavior, you are expressing who you believe you are. Discipline also requires the ability to act without immediate reward. Most distractions in life are designed to provide instant gratification. Social media, entertainment, and shortcuts all give quick satisfaction without requiring effort. Meaningful goals, however, require delayed gratification. They demand patience, effort, and endurance without immediate results. A disciplined mindset learns to disconnect action from immediate reward. You do the work not because it feels good right now, but because it builds something valuable over time. There will always be days when discipline feels difficult. On those days, the mind will create justifications for delay. It will suggest that starting tomorrow is better. That one day off will not matter, that you are too tired or not in the right mood. These thoughts are natural, but they are also temporary. The key is not to eliminate these thoughts, but to act despite them. Discipline is not the absence of resistance. It is the decision to move forward even when resistance is present. Environment also influences discipline more than most people realize. The spaces you spend time in, the people you surround yourself with, and the habits you are exposed to all shape your behavior. A focused environment makes discipline easier. A distracting environment makes discipline harder. When your environment supports your goals, you spend less energy fighting against temptation and more energy focusing on execution. That is why small adjustments in environment can have a significant impact on long-term consistency. Another important aspect of discipline is recovery. Many people misunderstand discipline as constant pressure without rest, but sustainable discipline includes balance. Rest, reflection, and recovery are part of the process, not interruptions to it. Without recovery, burnout becomes inevitable, and burnout leads to inconsistency. A strong mindset understands that discipline is not about doing everything at once, but about maintaining effort over time without losing stability or clarity. Every disciplined action builds momentum. At first, it feels difficult to start, but once momentum builds, action becomes easier. The challenge is always in the beginning, when resistance is highest and progress is not yet visible. But once you push through that initial resistance, each step becomes slightly easier than the last. Momentum carries you forward, but it only begins after consistent effort, even when results are not yet visible, even when progress feels slow, even when the mind is questioning whether continuing is worth it, even when distractions are pulling attention away from what matters most, and when you continue showing up regardless of how difficult it feels in the moment, building the foundation that slowly shapes your future direction through repetition and persistence that continues. The conversation you have with yourself is the most constant voice in your life. It is present in every decision you make, every challenge you face, and every moment of doubt or confidence. While external voices may influence you temporarily, your inner dialogue is what ultimately shapes how you see yourself and how you respond to the world. Most people underestimate this internal conversation Yet it quietly determines the quality of their actions, their consistency, and their ability to keep moving forward when things become difficult. Your mind is always interpreting experiences. When something happens, you immediately assign meaning to it. That meaning is not always accurate, but it feels real in the moment. If you fail at something, your inner voice may say that you are not good enough, that you are not capable, or that you should stop trying. If you succeed, the same voice may briefly celebrate, but then quickly move on or even dismiss the achievement as luck. This constant interpretation creates a pattern that either builds confidence or destroys it over time, depending on how it is managed. A success mindset requires awareness of this internal dialogue. Most people live inside their thoughts without questioning them. They accept every idea that arises in their mind as truth, even when those ideas are based on fear, insecurity, or past experiences. But thoughts are not facts. They are mental events, passing interpretations that can be observed and changed. The ability to step back from your thoughts and evaluate them is one of the most powerful skills you can develop in life. When your inner dialogue is negative, it does not always sound extreme. It often appears subtle and reasonable. It might say things like, "This is too difficult," or "I am not ready yet," or "People like me don't succeed at this level." These thoughts feel logical, which is why they are so influential. But their logic is often based on limitation rather than truth. If you accept them without challenge, they slowly shape your identity and influence your decisions, making you act in ways that confirm those beliefs. On the other hand, a strong inner dialogue does not ignore difficulty or pretend everything is easy. Instead, it reframes challenges in a way that supports action. When faced with uncertainty, it asks questions like, what can be learned here? What is the next step? How can this be improved? This shift in language changes emotional response. Instead of freezing in doubt, the mind begins searching for solutions. Instead of retreating, it starts engaging with the situation. The words you use internally become instructions to your brain. If you repeatedly tell yourself that something is impossible, your mind will begin to look for evidence that confirms that belief. If you repeatedly tell yourself that something is possible with effort and persistence, your mind begins to search for ways to make it work. This does not mean ignoring reality, but it means choosing interpretations that expand your thinking instead of limiting it. Many people are unaware of how often they engage in self-criticism. They speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to another person. This internal criticism is often disguised as motivation, but in reality it weakens confidence over time. When you constantly attack your own abilities, you create hesitation. When you hesitate too much, you avoid action. When you avoid action, you never build the evidence needed to improve self-belief. This cycle becomes self-reinforcing unless consciously interrupted. Mastering inner dialogue is not about forcing only positive thoughts. It is about developing control over interpretation. It means recognizing when a thought is unhelpful and choosing not to follow it. It means replacing automatic negative conclusions with more constructive ones. For example, instead of saying "I failed, so I am not capable," the mind can learn to say, "This approach did not work, so I need a different strategy." The situation remains the same, but the meaning changes completely, and that change in meaning affects future behavior. There is also a strong connection between inner dialogue and emotional resilience. When your internal voice is supportive, setbacks become easier to handle. A setback does not define your identity, it becomes a temporary event that can be processed and learned from. When your internal voice is harsh, even small setbacks feel overwhelming because they are attached to identity. This is why two people can experience the same situation but react in completely different ways based on how they interpret it internally. Awareness is the first step in changing this pattern. You cannot change what you do not notice. As you begin to observe your thoughts, you start to see patterns that were previously automatic. You notice recurring doubts, repeated fears, and habitual assumptions. Once you see them clearly, you gain the ability to question them. And once you can question them, you are no longer fully controlled by them. Over time, this awareness creates space between thought and reaction. Instead of immediately believing every thought, you begin to pause and evaluate it. This space is where transformation happens. In that space, you can choose a different response. You can decide whether a thought deserves attention or whether it should be let go. You begin to realize that you are not the voice itself, but the one observing the voice, the one deciding which direction to follow, the one who can interrupt old patterns and replace them with new ones that support growth and persistence, especially in moments when doubt becomes strong in the mind, begins to question whether continuing forward is still the right choice or whether stepping back might feel safer even when deeper aware of thought processes and evolve. Experience accumulates and influence is the made subtle but powerful ways, long time. And the most is the accumulated term roses, personal success, because most people power trained to determine many ways growth. Is it worthy people or flow? The world around us constantly rewards speed, quick outcomes, and instant validation. People want fast success, fast money, fast recognition, and fast transformation. But real growth rarely works that way. Meaningful progress is often slow, invisible in the beginning, and sometimes even frustrating because it does not immediately reflect the effort being put in. This creates a gap between expectation and reality, and many people quit in that gap before they ever experience what consistent growth actually feels like. Staying focused on long-term growth requires a shift in perspective. Instead of measuring success by what happens today or this week, you begin to measure it by the direction you are moving in. Direction becomes more important than speed. If you are moving in the right direction consistently, even slowly, you are still progressing. But if you are moving quickly in the wrong direction, you are only creating distance from your real goals. A success mindset understands that time is not the enemy, impatience is. One of the biggest challenges in long-term thinking is dealing with delayed results. When effort does not immediately produce visible outcomes, doubt begins to appear. The mind starts questioning whether the work is even worth it. This is where most people lose focus. They mistake slow progress for no progress. But growth in any meaningful area often happens beneath the surface long before it becomes visible on the outside. Just like roots of a tree grow deep before the tree grows tall. Personal development also requires unseen phases of strengthening before visible success appears. Another important aspect of long-term growth is learning to detach from emotional fluctuations. Daily emotions can be unreliable guides for long-term decisions. Some days you feel highly motivated and productive, while other days you may feel tired, distracted, or discouraged. If you allow these short-term emotional states to control your actions, your progress will always be inconsistent. A long-term mindset does not depend on feeling ready. It depends on commitment to direction regardless of emotional state. You continue moving even when the feelings are not aligned with your goals. Patience becomes a critical skill in this process. Not the kind of passive waiting where nothing is done, but active patience where effort continues even when results are not yet visible. This type of patience is difficult because it requires trust in a process that is not fully predictable. You are investing energy today for outcomes that may only appear much later. That delayed reward system tests your discipline, your belief, and your ability to stay consistent when there is no immediate reinforcement. A strong, long-term mindset also understands that setbacks are not interruptions. They are part of the structure of growth. When people focus only on short-term results, every setback feels like failure. But when the focus is long-term, setbacks become data points. They show what needs adjustment, what needs improvement, and what needs more time. Instead of stopping progress, they refine it. The goal is not to avoid obstacles, but to learn how to continue moving through them without losing direction. Comparison is another major threat to long-term focus. In a world where people constantly showcase achievements, it becomes easy to compare your beginning with someone else's middle or end. This creates unnecessary pressure and distorts perception of progress. You start feeling behind when in reality you are simply in a different stage of your journey. Long-term growth requires staying committed to your own timeline instead of being distracted by the timelines of others. Every meaningful journey has different starting points, different challenges, and different speeds of development. Consistency is the bridge between effort and long-term success. It is not the intensity of a single day that shapes your future, but the accumulation of many small, repeated actions over time. Each day may feel insignificant on its own, but together they form momentum. This momentum slowly transforms ability, mindset, and results. The challenge is that consistency does not always feel rewarding in the moment. It often feels repetitive, unnoticed, and slow, which is why many people abandon it before it has time to produce visible change. Another important factor is the ability to delay gratification. Long-term thinkers willingly sacrifice short-term comfort for future strength. They understand that every decision has a cost, either immediate or future. Choosing comfort now often means paying a higher price later, while choosing discipline now often creates freedom later. This understanding changes decision making at a fundamental level. It becomes easier to say no to distractions because the focus shifts toward building something that lasts beyond temporary satisfaction. Focus also plays a central role in long-term growth. In a world filled with constant distractions, maintaining attention on one direction becomes increasingly difficult. Every distraction pulls energy away from what truly matters. A scattered focus leads to scattered results, while a directed focus leads to meaningful progress. Protecting your attention becomes just as important as taking action itself, because without focus, effort gets diluted across too many directions and loses impact over time. Long-term growth also requires adaptability. Staying focused does not mean staying rigid. It means staying committed to the goal while being flexible with the methods. Sometimes strategies fail, sometimes plans need adjustment, and sometimes unexpected changes require new approaches. Adaptability ensures that you do not quit when conditions change. Instead, you adjust and continue moving forward with updated understanding and improved perspective. There is also a deep internal transformation that happens when someone commits to long-term thinking. You begin to see yourself differently. Instead of identifying as someone trying to succeed, you start identifying as someone who is already in the process of building something meaningful. This shift in identity strengthens persistence because actions begin to align with who you believe you are becoming rather than who you temporarily feel like being in a specific moment. Over time, this identity reinforces consistency, and consistency reinforces results, and results reinforce belief, creating a cycle that continues expanding in direction of progress that builds slowly but steadily through accumulated effort, repeated decisions, and continued focus on what matters most even when distractions become louder and the path ahead feels uncertain and requires continued patience, discipline, and attention to the long horizon of development that stretches further than immediate visibility and continues unfolding across time in ways that are not always immediately measurable or fully understood in the present moment, where actions are still forming or outcomes that are still developing and evolving graduated periods of sustained effort and persistence that keeps moving forward with that eruption, giving what rarely happens in a single moment, within a single moment. It is usually a slow process that begins long before a person actually decides to quit. It starts with small disappointments, repeated setbacks, unspoken doubts, and gradual emotional exhaustion. Over time, these experiences accumulate and create a mental weight that makes continuing feel harder than stopping. Most people do not recognize this process while it is happening. They only see the final decision, not the gradual weakening that led to it. A success mindset is built on the ability to recognize this pattern early and interrupt it before it becomes a final conclusion. The difference between those who succeed and those who stop is not that successful people never feel like quitting. They do. The difference is that they have trained themselves to respond differently when that feeling appears. Instead of treating discomfort as a signal to stop, they treat it as a signal to continue. They understand that discomfort is often a natural part of growth, not a sign of failure. When something is difficult, it does not necessarily mean it is wrong. It often means it is important. The idea of never giving up is not about blind persistence or ignoring reality. It is about intelligent persistence. It means continuing to move forward while learning, adjusting, and improving along the way. It means understanding that failure is not final unless you decide it is final. Every attempt carries information, and every setback carries direction. The only way failure becomes permanent is when learning stops and movement ends. One of the main reasons people give up is because they confuse delay with denial. When results do not appear quickly, they assume that success is not possible. But most meaningful achievements require time before visible results appear. The early stages often feel like effort without reward. This creates frustration, and frustration often leads to quitting. A strong mindset understands that delay is not rejection. It is part of the process that requires patience and continued action even when progress cannot yet be fully seen. Another factor that leads to quitting is emotional overload. When challenges build up without proper processing, the mind begins to feel overwhelmed. In that state, even small problems can feel large, and even simple tasks can feel heavy. The solution is not to avoid difficulty, but to break it down into manageable parts. When challenges are broken into smaller steps, they they become easier to face. Progress becomes more achievable, and the feeling of overwhelm begins to reduce. People also give up when they lose connection with their original purpose. At the beginning of any journey, motivation is usually strong because the vision is clear and exciting. But over time, routine replaces excitement and obstacles replace clarity. If the purpose is not strong enough, it becomes easy to forget why the journey started in the first place. That is why reconnecting with purpose is essential. When you remember why something matters to you, the difficulty becomes more bearable and the effort becomes more meaningful. Another important element is identity. When someone sees themselves as a person who gives up easily, their actions tend to match that belief. But when someone begins to see themselves as a person who continues despite difficulty, their behavior slowly changes. Identity shapes decisions, and decisions shape outcomes. Changing how you see yourself is often more powerful than changing external circumstances because it influences every future action. There is also a hidden danger in comparing your progress with others. When you constantly observe the success of others, especially those who are further ahead, it can create the illusion that you are falling behind. This perception can weaken motivation and increase the temptation to quit. But every journey has its own timing. Some people start earlier, some have different resources, and some face different challenges. Comparison removes context and creates unnecessary pressure that does not reflect reality. A strong mindset also understands the importance of small wins. When progress feels slow, acknowledging even minor improvements becomes crucial. Small wins are evidence that movement is happening, even if the final result is still far away. They provide motivation to continue and help maintain emotional stability during difficult phases. Without recognizing small progress, it becomes easy to feel stuck even when actual movement is occurring. Persistence is often misunderstood as stubbornness, but there is a difference. Stubbornness ignores learning and repeats the same approach without reflection. True persistence involves learning from each attempt and making adjustments along the way. It is not about doing the same thing endlessly, but about staying committed to the outcome while continuously improving the method. This balance between consistency and adaptability is what creates long-term success. There will always be moments when quitting feels easier than continuing. These moments are part of every meaningful journey. What matters is not avoiding those moments, but deciding how to respond when they appear. Each time you choose to continue instead of stop, you strengthen your ability to handle future challenges. Over time, this builds resilience, and resilience becomes the foundation for sustained progress, even in the face of repeated difficulty, uncertainty, and pressure that continues to test patience, focus, and commitment while shaping character through experience.